Hello girls, gays, and non-binary babes. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new, welcome. My name is Boston. Today I'm talking about the best books of 2020. So I read 241 books last year, and we've gotten a lot that were amazing, and I've managed to narrow it down to my top 15, and the first 10 will be not really in any order, but kind of one conglomerate. So we're gonna get into it. I'm very excited to talk about these books. So without any further ado, let's just do this thing. The first book that I have here is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This was a beautiful book that follows a man who is a social worker for magical kids, and he goes to these orphanages to check on the kids, make sure everything's all right. He's going to this house in the Cerulean Sea to check on this orphanage that is very classified, we'll say, and the kids there are very unique. And I fell in love with this book so hard, with all of the kids and every character. I just fell in love with every single one of them, and it was written so beautifully, and it just had such a beautiful message, and I truly cannot understand how anyone would rate this below 5 stars. Like, genuinely, I can't imagine why you would. But I just love this. I thought it was stunning, and I knew as soon as I finished it that it was going to be one of my favorite books of the year. Next, we have a book that's going to be on a lot of people's lists this year, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. A lot of people read this year, actually, and I'm quite surprised because it's been out for a couple years now. I obviously read it for the first time this year, and I loved it. And I think I loved this one most in comparison to the Dragon Republic because of the way this one in particular is set up. So the first half is our main character going to this, basically a school to learn how to be a good, like, general-ish thing, like a good war person, military person, I guess. That's the word I was looking for. But halfway through the book, a war does break out, and then our main character is swept up into that because she goes to one of the top military schools in the world, or in her country. And I really liked how it was split into the two parts, and I just really love this, and I like the main character. I liked everything about it, and it's probably one of the best, like, adult fantasies that I've read. It was really, really good. So yeah. So the next book that I have is Tiny Pretty Things by Sona Sharipotra and Danielle Clayton. This is a YA thriller that follows a few girls who are going to this ballet academy in New York City. And if you didn't know, there is a Netflix show on this now, which is not my favorite thing. Some people like it though, so check that out if you're interested. But I loved this book, and I'm not gonna lie, I love this book mainly because of the nostalgia it gave me, because I used to be a ballerina and I wanted to be a professional ballerina, and this follows a bunch of ballerinas, and I just want that life for myself. Not necessarily this life, because there's a lot of drama and near-death experiences for me, but I want the ballerina life, and I just loved reading a book with that in it, and I think that's why it really resonated with me, so that's probably why it's on this list. But yeah, you should definitely check this out, because there's nothing more dramatic and better than ballerinas trying to fight for the main role, because it's interesting, it's great, and I loved it. Next up, I have one of the best, most well-written horror books that I've ever read, and that is why it's on this list. It was amazing, and that is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This was phenomenal. This was so well written. So this follows a couple men who made a mistake when they were teenagers, and they are currently paying for it in the form of a cryptid of sorts. And it's so gory. It's so just bloody. And I just loved it. I loved every minute of it. It's just so good, and it's just wonderful. And like, if you like horror, you need to read this, because it's I can just tell it's going to become such a staple in horror that you just need to read it. Trust me, it's phenomenal. So the next book that I have is World War Z by Max Brooks. I just really love horror, and I love zombies, and I think this was done in a way that wasn't cheesy. I think the zombie thing can be overdone very easily, and this I don't think was. It was very interesting to read this in a pandemic though, one where everything is kind of getting mirrored, where things are getting like covered up, and you know, nobody really knows what's going on and all this different stuff. So this book is about the zombie war, told from the perspectives of a bunch of different people all across the world, and the main character, like narrator, is going around collecting all these stories. It's just so fascinating and definitely interesting to read it in the middle of a pandemic. Kind of terrifying also. So the next book that I have is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This was a journey, a whole journey. And looking back, was this like the most well-written book I've ever read? No. But I think it deserves a spot as one of the best of 2020, simply because of the emotions it made me feel at the end. Anger, shock is what the fuck an emotion, because I was feeling that emotion. The ending, I promise you, you will not see it coming. Like, I 100% guarantee you will not see it coming. It just shook me, and maybe it's because of the shock factor that I liked it. I know that, you know, books do that. They use the shock factor to make people think they're good books, but I thought this was a really good book. I don't know, maybe in a few years I'll think differently. But so the main character meets this man at a bar, and then she finds out that he's married, and then she decides to become friends with his wife. It's really freaking weird. It's all connected in some way, but I really liked it. Okay, the next book I have is another thriller slash horror, and that is The Anomaly by Michael Rucker. So this, I loved. If you saw me talk about this when I first read it, you know, I mentioned that it's a lot like Expedition Unknown, which I used to love, and I still watch it sometimes, but it's a great show, and it's just so fascinating. And it's just like Expedition Unknown, except the ending was so good and mind-blowing, and oh my gosh, I loved it. So it's about this guy who, he has this YouTube channel where he tries to uncover ancient secrets, and he and his team discover this cave in the Grand Canyon. That's right. And it turns into a little bit of Indiana Jones stuff. It was really good. I had so much fun with this, and I think this was my first dive into like horror this year, and oh, was it a good one. It was amazing. So next we have some fantasy books. So we're all out of the horror genre for the 10 books now. So the next book I have is, shockingly to many of you, not in my top 5. So the next book I have is The Camelot Betrayal by Kiersten White. Yes, of course, this is one of the best books I read this year. I love The Guinevere Deception, one of my favorite books of all time. I think the only reason that this is not in the top 5 is because I read so many phenomenal books this year, and like, it would have been in the top 5, but like, I just read so many good books this year. But this is the sequel to The Guinevere Deception, which is about Guinevere, and how she's a changeling and she's going to Camelot to marry Arthur to protect him from magic. And yeah, this is the sequel. I won't tell you what it's about because spoilers, but I really like this. I tabbed it up. This is the arc because I did get it back in March and I've already reread it. Yeah, really good. I really liked it. I think it was a really good sequel. It kept me interested the whole way through and I am so excited for the third book. I can't wait. Next, I have The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. This is the first in a bunch of companion books, I think, or books that at least are set in the same world. And this follows The Empress of Salt and Fortune. So our main character is non-binary and they are traveling and they meet this old woman on their way, and this old woman tells them the story of the Empress of Salt and Fortune and how she knew her and, you know, how the Empress was and what she was like. And I think this is just such a powerful book and I really like the message and the feminist take on it, and it was just so wonderful. I did, obviously, you can see, tab it up. And the second book in the companion series is When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which came out recently, and that one is great as well. Niveau is just definitely going to be somebody to watch because she just has a wonderful way of writing and telling stories, and this was just so beautiful. So the next book is actually kind of a companion novel, but I'm going to mention it with the first book. But that is The Book of Phoenix by Addie LaRue. This is the companion to Who Fears Death, and I gotta say, I really like this one a lot more. I think because the message was a little bit more clear to me. So I read this way back in January/early February. So this may be a little bit off. My description may be a little bit off, but this follows a woman who is grown, and it's kind of hard to describe. So this is a sci-fi fantasy, and so she's grown in this laboratory, and this book follows her then trying to take down these laboratories that are using people as experiments. And I loved the message of this book, and Addie LaRue just has such, again, a beautiful way of writing, and a lot of these books are the same thing. Like, a lot of the books that I love have beautiful writing, and these books were my first kind of dance with Addie LaRue, and I am so happy that they were because they were really good. And they're kind of backlisted. I can't remember when these were published. This one was published in 2015. So they're kind of backlisted, but I really think people should read them because they're really good. And I loved this. So yeah. And that is the final book of the first 10. So now we have the top 5. The first 4 will be in no particular order, but the final one is my favorite book of the year, which I've already mentioned a few times, so you probably already know. But yeah. Anyway, like I said, in no particular order, let's start off with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I feel like I knew when this book was announced that it was going to be on this list because of the synopsis. I'm a sucker for stuff like this. I get so weepy so fast, and I certainly did with this book. It had one of my favorite romance tropes, which is like soft boy. Is that a trope? Had one of my favorite like characterizations. And so the main character, Addie LaRue, makes a deal with the devil, and she doesn't quite get what she asked for, or she gets a little bit of too much of what she asked for. And so now nobody remembers her, and she lives basically forever. Nobody remembers her, nobody remembers her life. And one day she meets this guy who does remember her. I don't think I need to say any more, but this was just so beautiful. V.E. Schwab is just such an amazing writer, and I adored this book. I don't think I need to say any more. It was beautiful, and oh, it's gonna stick with me for a long time. I just know it. The next book that I have is Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis. This I adored. I adored this book. So this is like, I think it's like, people say it's like a Moulin Rouge retelling. I've never seen Moulin Rouge, so sorry, I don't know. But I like to describe it as, it's like America's Got Talent in a fantasy world. So it follows our main character who wants to be a part of this circus. So she's competing against other magicians to get a spot in this circus, and it deals a lot with her being the only woman and how that's affecting her and affecting her like score, I guess, not like score, but how the judges see her. And it also includes one of the best romances I have ever read. Point blank, period. Amazing. It's so cute. So this is one of the tropes I'm a sucker for, which is a boy that is mean to everybody except for the love interest. Wonderful. Love it. You need to read this. If you like the Night Circus or you like circus books, freaking read this. It's amazing. And the romance is so good. Okay, I'm gonna put this down now before I go on for too long about it because wonderful. The next book that I have is a familiar name that you will see. That is Devolution by Max Brooks. Max Brooks also wrote World War Z, if you were paying attention. This is Bigfoot. First we had zombies, now we have Bigfoot. I freaking love this. I have no words for the way this made me feel. It made me feel so seen because being a reader, especially on BookTube, you feel very out of place when you say you want to read books about Bigfoot. You know, it's not exactly mainstream when everybody's reading YA fantasy. There's nothing wrong with YA fantasy, but it's currently just not my bread and butter. This is my bread and butter. Oh my gosh, this was phenomenal. So this is told in files about the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre, and it follows a bunch of people who live in this very small, very green little community, and it's very secluded, and Mount Rainier erupts one day and completely cuts them off, and then the Sasquatches come. Wonderful. This is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Obviously it's about Bigfoot, but I have always had a fascination with cryptids my entire life, and so to see that in a book, and in a book that's really well written and really popular too, is just, it just makes me feel some kind of way. Okay, so the next book that I have is Foul is Fair by Hannah Capin, and this book just has such a special place in my heart, and it's gonna sound really weird, but I feel like, okay, so a lot of people know about the Good for Her movie, or the Good for Her cinematic universe. You know, movies like Ready or Not, Gone Girl, but this belongs in the Good for Her cinematic universe. This follows, okay, so first of all, it's a Macbeth retelling, and it follows this girl who is sexually assaulted by a group of guys one night at a party. And she, with the help of her 3 mysterious friends, gets revenge on all of them. And it is so good. It's so good. As somebody who loves Macbeth and loves a good revenge story, this was candy for me. And everybody needs to read this because it's so good. So, we are at the final book. My favorite book of the year. Drumroll, please. My favorite book of the year of 2020 was The Midnight Lie by Marie Rutkoski. This is everything I've ever wanted in a YA fantasy. It was phenomenal. It's sapphic. The sapphic romance is absolutely to die for. It leaves off on a really good cliffhanger. It talks a lot about class and the struggles of lower class people, and it's set in a very, very unfair world, and a world where history is erased, and it just has so much meaning to it, and it really packs a punch, and I absolutely adore it, and that's why it's my favorite. It's phenomenal. So this follows our main character, who is almost the lowest class. It follows her life in the beginning. She ends up getting arrested, and she meets a traveler, and she finds out some things about her city that nobody knows, and that this traveler tells her. And this traveler is the only one who knows because history has been erased for everybody else in this city. There's no history books, there's no nothing. They don't know what came before their positions they are in now. So it's absolutely wonderful. Y'all gotta read it. Best book of the year. So that is it. That is my best books of the year list. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you watched this far, leave me a moon emoji, like the crescent moon emoji. Leave me that in the comments and tell me your favorite book you read this year, because I am very interested to know that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I just knocked over my books. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.